The silence was deafening. While every other contender in the NFL was making aggressive moves to bolster their rosters, the Detroit Lions sat quietly on the sidelines watching opportunities slip through their fingers. And just when Lions Nation was ready to accept that management had gone conservative, that Dan Campbell's trademark aggression had somehow vanished when it mattered most, everything changed in the most spectacular way imaginable. Welcome to Lions News Fan Report, your home for breaking news, exclusive updates, and the kind of insider analysis that keeps you ahead of the curve on everything Detroit Lions. I'm bringing you a story today that's going to completely shift how you see this team's championship aspiration. And trust me when I say you're going to want to hear every single detail of what just went down. Let me take you back to Tuesday afternoon, trade deadline day. The clock was ticking down, and Lions fans everywhere were refreshing their social media feeds hoping for something. Anything that would signal the front office understood the urgency of our situation. We watched the New York Jets completely blow up their roster, trading away Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner in massive deals that sent shockwaves through the league. We saw edge rusher Jermaine Johnson's name floating around as a potential target, with teams reportedly needing to cough up a second-round pick to get him, for a defense that desperately needed help opposite Aiden Hutchinson. For a secondary that's been exposed repeatedly, this felt like exactly the kind of move we should have been making, but the deadline came and went. 4 p.m. Eastern Time arrived, and the Lions had done absolutely nothing. Zero moves. Complete radio silence. And I'm not going to lie to you, Lions Nation, it felt like a gut punch. Here we are sitting at 5-3 after that devastating home loss to the Minnesota Vikings. Watching our defensive deficiencies get exploited week after week, and management decides this is the time to stand pat? It didn't make sense. It didn't align with everything we know about Dan Campbell's personality. The man who goes for it on fourth down in situations that make analytics experts nervous. The coach who preaches aggression and attacking mentality suddenly went conservative when the stakes were highest. The frustration was real and it was justified. We all remember what happened with Zadarius Smith in the preseason. The Lions chose not to re-sign him. Let him walk to the Philadelphia Eagles, where he eventually retired. That decision looked questionable at the time, and watching our pass rush struggle without him made it look even worse. Now here we were again, apparently making the same mistake by refusing to address glaring needs when players were available. ESPN's Jeremy Fowler was reporting that the Jets wanted a second-round pick for Johnson. And while that's not cheap, it's also not an unreasonable price for a former first-round pick and Pro Bowler who could have given us a legitimate threat opposite Hutch. But defense wasn't our only concern. And this is where the story starts to take a turn that nobody saw coming. In that brutal Week 9 loss to Minnesota, we lost guard Christian Mahogany to a broken ankle. Dan Campbell addressed the media on Monday, and his assessment was bleak. Mahogany will be out for a long time with the injury. For an offensive line that had already taken a step back from the dominant force it was the previous 2 seasons, losing another starter was catastrophic. Our offensive line is supposed to be our identity, the foundation that everything else is built on. And suddenly we're dealing with depth issues that threaten to derail our entire season. The initial response seemed underwhelming at best. The Lions signed rookie guard Jack Conley to the practice squad. A practice squad addition. That was the answer to losing a starting guard for an extended period. The plan appeared to be sliding either Tristan Colon or Kingsley Eguakun into the starting lineup and hoping for the best. Now, I've got nothing against those guys. They're professionals who work hard and do their jobs. But asking them to step into starting roles on a team with Super Bowl aspirations is a massive ask. This is where championship windows close, where one injury cascades into multiple problems, where a season that looks so promising suddenly feels fragile. And here's where it got even more frustrating. The Cleveland Browns, a team that's going absolutely nowhere this season, had 2 multiple-time Pro Bowl guards potentially available, Joe Bitonio and Wyatt Teller. These aren't just solid players. These are elite guards, guys who have been to multiple Pro Bowls, guys who anchor one of the better offensive lines in football when healthy. The Browns were sellers. They were clearly in position to move veterans for assets. And the Lions apparently didn't even make a serious push to acquire either of them. At least that's what everyone thought as Tuesday turned into Wednesday, and the initial reports started circulating. The narrative was set. The Lions had failed at the trade deadline. Management had shown a lack of urgency that didn't match our championship window. Dan Campbell's aggressive philosophy apparently didn't extend to roster construction. We were going to have to ride or die with what we had, hope the injuries didn't pile up, and pray that our defensive deficiencies wouldn't get exposed in the playoffs. It was a bitter pill to swallow, and Lions fans across the country were voicing their frustration loudly and clearly. The social media reaction was swift and harsh. Talk radio was lit up with angry callers. The consensus was clear. The Lions had blown a golden opportunity, but here's what nobody knew. Here's what was happening behind the scenes while everyone was writing their hot takes about Detroit's conservative approach. Here's the information that's going to change everything you thought you knew about this trade deadline. The Lions weren't done. They weren't sitting on their hands. They weren't being conservative. They were working on something bigger, something that required more time to finalize, something that was going to address one of our most critical needs in the most aggressive way possible. Late Wednesday evening, news started to break that sent shockwaves through Lions Nation. The Detroit Lions had executed a blockbuster trade with the Cleveland Browns, and they didn't just get one Pro Bowl guard. They got both of them. Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller were coming to Detroit. The Lions had pulled off one of the most stunning moves of the entire trade period, landing two elite offensive linemen in one massive deal that completely transforms our offensive line and gives us the kind of depth and talent up front that can carry us deep into the playoffs. Let me break down exactly what this means, because the implications are enormous. Bitonio is a five-time Pro Bowler who's been one of the most consistent left guards in football for nearly a decade. He's 33 years old, so he's a veteran presence with playoff experience and leadership qualities. Teller is a two-time Pro Bowler who at 29 is right in his prime. He's a mauler in the run game, exactly the kind of physical presence that fits Dan Campbell's offensive identity. Together, they give us arguably best guard tandem in the entire NFL and completely shore up our interior offensive line. Think about what our offensive line looks like now. We've got Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell at the tackle spots, two of the best in the business. Now we add Bitonio and Teller at the guard positions, giving us four legitimate Pro Bowl caliber players on the same line. Frank Ragnow at center is already one of the best in the league. This isn't just a good offensive line anymore. This is a historically great unit, the kind of line that can impose its will on any defense in football. The kind of line that can open up massive running lanes for David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. The kind of line that gives Jared Goff all day to pick apart defenses through the air. The strategic brilliance of this move cannot be overstated. Yes, we still have defensive needs that weren't addressed. Yes, we could still use more help in the secondary and at edge rush. But here's what the Lions clearly understand. Your offensive line is the foundation of everything. If you can dominate up front, if you can control the line of scrimmage, if you can run the ball whenever you want and protect your quarterback in obvious passing situations, you can beat anybody. The Lions are doubling down on their identity, on what makes them special, on the physical brand of football that Dan Campbell has built this team around. Let's talk about the immediate impact. We've got the Washington Commanders coming up in Week 10, and we're 8.5-point favorites, even with Jaden Daniels out with a dislocated elbow. Now we're going to roll into that game with an offensive line that's going to absolutely maul their defensive front. We're going to establish the run game early, control the clock, keep their offense off the field, and impose our will for 4 quarters. That's Lions football at its finest, and now we have the personnel to execute that game plan against anyone. Looking at the bigger picture, this move addresses the mahogany injury in the most aggressive way possible. Instead of hoping practice squad players can step up, instead of asking backups to play above their heads, we went out and got 2 of the best guards in football. We turned a position of weakness into a position of overwhelming strength. That's championship-level roster management, and it shows that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell understand exactly what this team needs to make a deep playoff run. The financial details haven't been fully disclosed yet, but given that both players are veterans on reasonable contracts and the Browns are clearly rebuilding, the Lions likely didn't have to give up an insane amount of draft capital. We're probably looking at a combination of mid-round picks, maybe a second and a fourth, possibly with some conditional elements based on playoff performance. That's an absolute steal for 2 Pro Bowl guards who immediately make us better and give us the kind of offensive line depth that championship teams need. This is the kind of move that changes the entire trajectory of a season. We went from looking vulnerable and thin up front to having arguably the most dominant offensive line in football. We went from questions about whether we could protect Goff and establish the run to having no questions at all about our ability to impose our will physically. This is Dan Campbell football taken to the absolute extreme, and I am here for every single second of it. Lions Nation, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this blockbuster move? Does landing Bitonio and Teller make up for not addressing the defense? How dominant do you think our offensive line can be with this kind of talent? What are your expectations for the rest of the season now that we've made this massive upgrade? Drop your comments below because I love hearing your perspectives on these huge moves. And if you haven't already, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because this is exactly why you need to be locked into Lions News Fan Report. When massive news breaks, when the Lions make moves that change everything, I'm here to break it down and give you the analysis you deserve. This season is special, and we're going to experience every moment of it together. One pride, let's go.